Hey, it's Mikey. I am very excited because I get to have another friend in the studio, someone that hasn't been here in a hot minute. It's nice to have my friend Halsey.
Last time I spoke to you, I feel like each one of your albums specifically kind of crystallizes a moment in your life. You've been through so many changes and so many iterations of who you are since the last time we spoke before the pandemic. And now So Good is here, and it's clearly like it's almost like chapters of a book. It's been fun to watch, and you worked so hard for like a decade to, it's almost 10 years now we've known each other. What have you learned over the last 3 years that you kind of try to just remind yourself of as you're going through everything right now?
Ooh, that's a big and good question. Honestly, I've kind of just learned to submit. I've learned to submit. I think that every single time I think the world is ending, two things happen. One is that the world gets better eventually, again, and things I become nice and I experience joy and things improve and I'm surrounded by people that I love. And the second thing is that every time the world ends, it will end again and you will go through that again and you will survive that again. And I think for me, I've kind of just learned to like experience like the lower points in my life as, necessary growth and phases that I'm going to continue to experience. And that for every like low phase that I'm in, there's a tremendous amount of growth and a tremendous amount of positivity that comes in the wake of it. That prepares me for the next time. I think I spent a lot of time being like, gosh, when is this going to stop and I'm just going to feel good and be happy forever? And that's not realistic. That just doesn't happen for anybody. And so once I kind of accepted that and started submitting to the process, I found myself a lot happier when I didn't waste my energy controlling things that were sort of out of my hands and out of my wheelhouse.
It seems like we learned the same lessons over the last few years. Because the thing that I like to say to people is, everything that life has thrown at you, every circumstance, you've gotten past it up until this point, right? So there's no reason you can't get past the next thing and the next thing, because everything that's been difficult, you've gotten past already.
Yeah, 100%.
And the other thing is, like, all these emotions that we get, a lot of the time don't really serve us at all.
Yes.
Like anxiety, anger, like they're kind of like they're drainers. They're not really useful at all. So why are you giving it attention?
Therapy is key. Therapy is the key.
100. And So Good is just like such a beautiful song to the next step in your life. When did So Good come, or how long did you have it kind of in your pocket? Or was it something that just like you were, as usual, you sit down and you like to scribble, it just kind of came out?
I had no intentions of writing another record or putting anything out, actually. But I stumbled across kind of this piano track that just really compelled me. And I realized I had more to say, because I wrote the album, If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power. I wrote half of it just before I got pregnant and half of it in the beginning of my pregnancy. And, so much had happened and changed for me since then, which was, I had my baby and I was a mom and I had this family and like, as usual with music, I feel like sometimes because of the nature of it, you write something and then by the time you're out performing or promoting it, you're kind of already like in a different place than you were when you wrote it. I find that happens very frequently. And I just felt like I had more to say. I had more of a story to tell and I had to play catch up a little bit with some people. And for those who keep up with me, I wanted them to kind of know, like, how did all this happen? And like, why are you here? Because for a person who's like, historically really transparent and really an open book, I've noticed I've started to kind of close off a little bit as I have more things in my life that I have a desire to protect. And so I just wanted to give the story kind of from my POV. And it's funny, I've never once considered So Good to be like a quote unquote like pandemic record, but in a way it kind of is, since it's this like right person, wrong time kind of story. Being home during COVID was at first like really terrible for me, and then it turned into something really wonderful. Like having that amount of time to be alone and be alone with my thoughts and to be in control of my own schedule. And okay, I don't have a show today. I don't have press. I don't have a sound check. I don't have whatever. Like, what do I want to do? Who do I want to spend my time with? Like, what things in my life have I kind of put on the side table, put on the mantle and been like, I'll get to this when I have the time or the emotional capacity to get to this. Like, what are those things? And one of the things that I really started thinking about was like, who I'd want to spend my time with, and like I was kind of, catastrophizing and as I think a lot of us were, which was like, oh gosh, what if this is forever? Who would I want to spend this type of forever with? Like trapped in the house and like, the world is unknown and unfamiliar. And I really started thinking about one person. And I thought, like, all right, maybe I'll give it a shot. And I did. And I found that having that time and having that grace and not having those added distractions really gave me an opportunity to create a relationship that had a tremendous foundation that was incredibly functional and incredibly delicate and wasn't rushed through or like, I think sometimes for artists, like relationships can be complicated because you have to stuff so much growth into such little time if you don't see each other a lot. It's like if you're touring and you spend 1 week per month with each other, you got to shove that whole month into that 1 week. And that's not, a really realistic or healthy way for a relationship to grow. So having had all that time, I had this time to like really think about how I feel and think about what I want and start to build a relationship that was just slow. It was the first thing in my life I had ever done that was slow. And I know to everybody else, it probably didn't seem slow because then all of a sudden I was pregnant and everyone was like, where the heck did that come from? But for me, it was just slow. And the other thing that was really nice about being pregnant was that I couldn't speed it up if I wanted to. I'm so used to kind of like speeding up everything in my life and fast tracking through it. And this was one experience I was having that was like, hey, you have to submit and you have to let this happen at whatever pace it wants to. And in a way, this song is kind of reflective of that, which is like, you can't speed up or force things that are meant to happen the way they're meant to happen. I hope that makes sense. My gosh.
No, totally. Listen, I know that when I speak to Halsey, we're going to get a thoughtful, extended answer. And first off, even though you didn't intend to release So Good, I mean, it's not like you didn't release a movie, a poetry book, beauty lines. Like you've been busy, you've been putting out stuff, just stuff that not necessarily the music that you've been grinding like 10 years for.
Yeah, I think I got to a point where I had to be realistic with myself and I had to be like, okay, I'm putting out music faster than I'm growing and I can't put out music unless I've grown, otherwise I'm just putting out like a reheated iteration of the last mark of growth that I was commemorating. So I think after this, I got to a point where I was like, I have a lot to learn about myself and my life is changing. And once I've made up my mind about how I feel about all these new things, then music will come because I really can't, write records unless I feel I have to write in a way where like the words are demanding to come out. I can't sit down and try to like force something into making sense or to be like, oh, maybe I'll write a song about that way that I felt 5 years ago. It's like I do it as like almost a selfish process in a way where like writing an album is like a form of therapy to me. I discover a lot of things about myself when I see the words on the page or I hear them in the speaker. There's a lot of times where I'll hear a song back after I wrote it and I'll be like, oh gosh, is that how I feel? I didn't realize I was still so upset about that thing. Well, clearly I am because I put it in a song, which means I think it's important enough to say, oh gosh, I need to do some work on that part of me. You know what I mean? Like kind of having that experience. And so I started exploring other, areas of creativity that make me happy. And all of it is in a quest to sort of exercise my creative muscles and keep myself nimble and give myself stamina as a person who like, and I always want to be making stuff because I want to. I never want to fall into the trap of where I'm making something because I think I have to, if that makes any sense.
No, I mean, that's the most Halsey thing. I mean, the pilot light has to be lit in order for you to kind of chase after. And that's the way you've always been. It's like, all right, my attention is here right now. I have to put my energy there. It's never really, even though now you're doing more things than ever, you're still like super focused on one thing at a time.
Oh yeah. But it also, like you said, it's kind of like, it is kind of that like multiple synapses firing at once where I'm like, like every day I wake up and I'm like, a new project of mine is the most biggest deal in the world that day. And then like I'll like watch a movie or read a book or I'll like walk past the storefront or like something will happen and it's like I don't even expect it coming and then it'll like, it'll ignite a thought in my brain and all of a sudden I'm off and I'm on to like, something else.
Even though you are incredibly creative, you are now compartmentalizing like what is your job and what is your life, which is
Oh my God, I don't even know. I don't know what my job is. People are like, it's so funny. I'll do something so silly. Like I'll be signing up to get like a COVID test, or I'm in the dentist office and the paperwork is like occupation. And I'm like, hell if I know. I don't know. What is my occupation? What do I do? Am I a,
just put Halsey there. It's fine.
yeah, like I'm a Halsey. That's what I am.
But what I meant by that is like when I okay, so one of the coolest things I learned when I spoke to Ed Sheeran during the pandemic, he had thought about like kind of retiring, because it's like, okay, what do you do when you kind of accomplished so much? He started picking up the music again after doing painting and whatever, and he decided, okay, I'm gonna, compartmentalize my family life and my music life. And he's like, I'm gonna be in the studio from 9 to 5, let's say, whatever, right? And then after that, I'm gonna go have dinner and be with my family and do my thing. And it sounds like you're doing your version of that, where it's like, okay, I'm gonna focus on this thing now, but now I'm gonna go see my partner, my kid, and we're gonna have dinner, whatever activities you guys do.
Yeah, I think this life, and when I say this life, I mean being a musician, and half I mean being a mother. It teaches you a real lesson in like, not being selfish with your time and not being selfish with yourself. And like, I think there's something really healing about that too, because selfishness can breed self-destruction, where like I sometimes used to work myself to the point of being exhausted because I was like, I can handle it. But now I'm in like a new place in my life where if I work myself to exhaustion, I'm not only hurting myself, I'm hurting other people who depend on me. And that's kind of enough to intervene and be like, okay, maybe I haven't quite reached the stage of self-growth or self-healing where like I have the self-preservation to say no for me, but I will definitely say no for him. So it's kind of like saving you in a way. And at first, when I had to compartmentalize, I was really overwhelmed by it. And I was like, gosh, how am I supposed to wake up and do a photo shoot for About Face? And then I have to go to the studio and do a rehearsal for the tour. And then I have to come home and I have to do bath time and dinner and bed and like all these things. I was like, how am I going to be able to do all this at once? And one of the approaches I found to handling it is kind of one of the approaches that I have in music when I'm on stage and I'm going from a sad song to a happy song to an angry song to a hurt song to a powerful song. Like you have to kind of on stage for 2 hours find the ability to like to flip authentically between all of these really conflicting emotions. And part of what I do when I'm on stage is I kind of do the like inner child thing, where like instead of feeling like it's a burden to have to flip through those emotions, I consider it a privilege. I'm kind of like a little kid, and like I've been kind of approaching work the same way, where I'm like, I'm going to wake up and now I'm doing makeup and now I'm doing acting and now I'm doing music, and I get to go home and be mom and play in the bath, and like, kind of having that childish like mentality of like, of course I can play pretend. Of course I can assume a new personality from minute to minute, or a new responsibility or a new state of being, because I'm a human and multidimensional, and this is what I've been designed to do. And I've been designed to do that since I was a little kid. I think that tapping into that mentality has made me a better compartmentalizer, but also kind of a better mom, because I feel like I see the world from my son's point of view, like from his height, if that makes any sense.
No, totally. One of the things that, for some reason, I can't remember what the conversation I was having, but I ended up describing, your music and kind of the way you do things is that like everything you do has kind of like a color. So whether it's like literal with like About Face or any of the visuals that you do or your music, there's like this colorful palette or moody palette in everything you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree completely. It's like actually to the point where it like bleeds into my real life, like the way I dress, the way I furnish my house, the way I think that I moved after every album I made until this one, just simply because the house would always feel too much like the old art, the old creativity. Everything from like the couches I chose to like the clothes to, all these different things. I would just look around and I'd be reminded of an old creative headspace and like old inspiration. And so it wasn't good for like making new things. So I would move into a new place, design that place to be like, new creative palette and vibe and whatever. And then that would be over and then I do it again. And actually the house I live in now, I actually moved into after this album was already finished. So I think I'm still safe for a little while until I make the next one. I think with age and with maturity is coming like this more confirmed sense of identity, which is I've identified myself as a person who's constantly changing. And now I'm living a life where stability is necessary in some ways. I'm sitting right now just like looking around my home being like, I really like this house. I love this house. I want to raise my child here. I really hope I don't want to leave after I write the next album. So, you know, being like conscious of that, I think is making me kind of explore that palette in other ways. You know what I mean? In more delicate ways. But it is so true. It's so true. And I'm such a product of my environment. Like sometimes like if I'm in a studio and it's like, you know, dark red and brown and it's like moody, the song will sound that way. Or if I'm in a studio and it's like colorful and there's big windows and there's grass outside and like, you know, there's a puppy running around in the backyard, I'm like, you know, that affects the song too. I'm really sensitive to those things.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it all makes sense. Everything is so much more an extension of you than people know. And I mean, the other thing is, gosh, the Halsey yard sales must be so difficult after every
You know what? I'm a pretty impeccable thrifter, to be honest with you. I love vintage things. I love antiques. I love vintage things. I think people get really surprised when they come to my house and they see it because I think that they're thinking it's going to be one way. And like my home is very old. It's very old and lived in and homey, and it's a mess. And it's a mess because it's a home that people live in and a home that people love, you know, like there's like toys and things and stuff all over the place. And like, I kind of think that I feel really comfortable in that kind of like chaos and that kind of disorder. And I don't know if it would be the Halsey yard sale, it'd be so good, but it might be you might see me at other people's yard sales being like, what can I get? What do you got? What treasure am I going to stumble on here that's going to inspire me? I'm kind of like a magpie in that way. I like walk down the street, I see something shiny and I pick it up and I'm like, ooh, what is this? You know?
Yeah,
like,
at this point, I'm going to figure if I pull on a candlestick, there's going to be a secret door now.
You know, what's funny is I'm in my library right now while I'm talking to you. And it really does look like a mystical, like a wizard's lair library. I love it. It's my favorite room in the house.
Hopefully one day I'll get to see it.
Yeah, definitely. Next time you got to come. I mean, it's a library, so I don't know how like cool or poppin' or interesting it is, but like I do have my comic collection here though, which I feel like you would enjoy browsing through if I know anything about you ever over the past 10 years.
You know, you're not wrong. I mean, it's the thing we bonded over the first time we met. So
I know.
And Mikey Piff. You're listening to SiriusXM On Demand.